Hi, Bucknuts readers, subscribers, 247 Sports. Patrick Murphy here. We were supposed to have Dave Biddle with us, but some technical difficulties on his end. But I'm going to be here talking for the next little bit about Ohio State fall camp, kind of what we've seen so far, everything that we've kind of touched on. Some of this we've already touched on in some of our writing and things like that, but just kind of recapping what we've seen. They're now five or so days into fall camp. The Buckeyes will start up with full pads tomorrow. So we'll really start to get some more stuff as we get further in, but figured it's a good time after several practices to kind of get going on this. First, I think the biggest thing that is different from this year, and by the way, if you have questions you want to ask about the Buckeyes, feel free to comment here. I'll try and answer those as we go along. But the biggest thing this year is that this is a normal fall camp, right? Last year, if you remember this time of the year, it was, guys were trying to figure out what was going to happen for the season. The season was getting canceled. They didn't know if they would play this fall, if they would play in the spring, if they would play at all because of the virus, all that stuff. So it's good to have a fall camp. It's as normal as can be expected. It's great from a media perspective. We've been able to be over at the Woody so far this offseason, which has been awesome. So far this preseason, I should say, which has been awesome. Getting to talk to the guys in person. We're still wearing masks because that's the mandate when we're inside on Ohio State's campus. But we've been out at practice. We haven't had to do that. It's been great. I think everyone really appreciates the fact that we're kind of back. And so I wanted to start off by just touching on that. As for fall camp itself, first thing I wanted to touch on was kind of the biggest surprise. And there hasn't been a ton so far this year. We're still obviously waiting on a lot of questions to be answered. But I think surprise-wise, I was a bit surprised when we learned that Mayan Williams was taking the first reps at running back. I'll touch on that a little bit more later. I've been surprised with some of the linebackers, the guys that have kind of stepped ahead. Cody Simon, Mitchell Melton hasn't really been out there; he's been hurt. And we're still waiting to see a little bit what that will look like. Again, I'll touch on that in a little bit, but it's been fun to be back out there and just see everything. So let's start with what most people are worried about the most, and that's the quarterback position, right? I think everyone wants to know who's going to be the starting quarterback, when we're going to know who that starting quarterback is. If we're being honest here, it's most likely going to be CJ Stroud. I think everybody kind of expects that, but nothing's official till it's official with Ohio State. Ryan Day has stayed very true to his word that there's going to be a quarterback battle. There's going to be a competition. That's how it was all through spring between CJ Stroud, Jack Miller, and Kyle McCord. And that's been the case. We talked to Ryan. He has said that there's been no leader. We talked to the three quarterbacks that are on campus, and they all say that they're in a battle, that reps are getting split evenly. Now, when we've been out at practice, and this was the case in the spring, CJ Stroud almost always is taking the first team reps. And, so I think that is indicating, kind of where this is going. Everything we've heard obviously has pointed that direction. But I've always been quick to say, don't count out Kyle McCord and Jack Miller, and both of them. And I know some people tend to think Jack Miller would be the odd man out, but that's a very talented kid. They're both very talented kids. And as Ryan Day has said, and he's pointed this out a number of times, they're going to need multiple quarterbacks. Now, does that mean like in 2014 when Braxton Miller goes down, JT Barrett has to step in, then JT Barrett goes down at the end of the season, Cardale Jones has to step in? As a Buckeye fan, you obviously hope that that's not the case, right? You want to see one guy go from start to finish, the best guy kind of do the job. But obviously it worked in 2014. Ryan Day really means by that is that every day in practice, they need guys that are going to be ready, that are going to push the starter. You can't have guys disengaged just because they didn't win the job, right? And I think the guys understand that. Now, the obvious question here is the transfer portal and which guys may enter the transfer portal if they don't win the job. I don't like to speculate on that a ton. Obviously, it's become a much bigger thing in recent years with the waivers that the NCAA was doing. That what got Justin Fields and Trey Sermon and some other guys here, and then obviously now the rules changed and you have a one-time free transfer, right? So these guys certainly could transfer. It's not out of the realm of possibility at all. You hope that more guys want to stay, and then let's be honest, Quinn Ewers is going to be here soon, probably within, excuse me, the next week or so. And that's another body, another talented player that's going to be added to this mix. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Buckeyes handle this, because you already have a complicated quarterback situation with the three of them. Now you're adding in another very talented kid, but a kid who should be playing his senior year of high school, right? I mean, he is the number one recruit in the country, no doubt about his talent, but coming in middle of fall camp, how much does he really get, into the mix before the season starts? In my mind, this would be more of a developmental year for Quinn. Obviously, getting him here, getting him practicing, getting him used to everything. I compare it a little bit to what the basketball team did last year with Michi Johnson, who came in December. The season had already started. Buckeye fans got to see a little bit of him, but probably not as much as if he didn't reclassify and enroll a year early. So we'll see what happens with Quinn, and we'll see what happens with the other guys. Does Jack Miller, does Kyle McCord, if those are the two guys that don't win the job, do both of them transfer? It's tough to say. That's a decision that they have to make, one that's going to be about what's best for them. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But I think it's more likely that you see the guy who wins the starting job, assuming no injuries, keep that job throughout the year. Maybe some Quinn Ewers at points throughout the season. But, I think what will be very interesting is what happens next spring when Quinn Ewers now, instead of enrolling in January, it has been in the program for a year, and maybe CJ Stroud, and I just keep using him because I believe he'll be the one that wins the job. But whoever it is, maybe he goes out and has a Heisman Trophy finalist type of season like Justin Fields did his first season here. Maybe that's the case. And at that point, you probably don't even worry about who the starting quarterback is next year. But if it's not a great year, if the quarterback is good, not great, then maybe Quinn Ewers is a bit more part of the discussion come the spring, now that he's acclimated and whatnot. So the quarterback position, we haven't found out yet. Ryan said at Big Media Days a few weeks ago that he wants to name a guy. Hopefully a couple weeks in, we're getting to that point. This is the start of the second week. He said today when we talked to him that they're on track for that. This week will be a big one. Wednesday, Saturday practices for the quarterbacks, and then we'll see if it bleeds over into that third week. Obviously, we'll keep updated on that. Staying on the offensive side of the ball, but shifting positions, and I've seen a couple people already ask about this, the running backs and kind of the pecking order. And I mentioned already, a bit of a surprise to me was Mayan Williams at the front of the running backs when we were out there. Now, this is just drills. This isn't, full scrimmage, or we haven't seen any of that. But it does say something about what Ohio State thinks of Mayan Williams. I do still think Master Teague is in line to start or have a big role with this team. But I think the fact that they're letting Mayan Williams, a guy who only had 10 carries last year, take the first reps in practice in front of the media, knowing that that's going to be reported, says something about what the confidence level in the redshirt freshman and what he showed last year. It was that Clemson game, I know, is the one that everyone points to because he had the few big runs there. I certainly think he's a talented kid. I want to see him do it a bit more. I've said that all off season, but I think the coaching staff who sees him every day clearly has a reason for putting him, at the front or at least in the conversation with Master T. I think Marcus Crowley's a guy that a lot of people are kind of forgotten about because he gets hurt after or partway through his freshman year, was really starting to come on at that point in his freshman year, having some real big plays. I mean, even the play he got hurt on towards ACL was a real nice run. I remember us being down on the sideline in the fourth quarter of that game. I think it was against Rutgers when he ran right to where we were, and you could see going into the tent that he did not look happy. But a guy who I think is very talented. So it would not surprise me if to start the year, it's Mayan Williams, it's Master T, and it's Marcus Crowley. Sorry. The three kind of co-starters, rotation, whatever you want to call it, early on. Travion Henderson, Evan Pryor. Evan Pryor, to me, I think probably doesn't see a bunch of time this year. He works his way into the position in the future, and I think he's very talented. Travion Henderson will be interesting as well, and a couple people have asked about him. He was going fourth in the reps that we saw behind Marcus Crowley. I think that's probably a good place to start a true freshman coming in. He's the number one ranked running back in the country in high school last year for a reason. Now, he didn't play high school football last fall because of how things went in Virginia. So that's a year of missed time for him, frankly, and he'll have to make that up. And he came in the spring. Obviously, it looked good in the spring game. It was tough to judge. It was much more of a passing attack in the spring game. But he's a guy who I could see as the season progresses really working his way into your role. Ryan has talked about how serious he is with his work. And you can tell that he's a special talent. So he's a guy that's going to get on the field. It's just a matter of when the coaches put the trust in him to handle everything that goes along with being a running back. It's not just carrying the ball. It's ball security. It's pass protection. If you're going to be out there, they want you to be able to do it all. And obviously the guys that are ahead of him right now all have at least 1 year, if not more, in the program. So we shall see with that. I'm not going to touch on the wide receivers. I think everyone knows what the wide receivers bring. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, those are the top two. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Julian Fleming. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's going to be a loaded group. It's going to be the quarterback's best friend. But the offensive line, I think, is interesting because Ryan Day talked earlier today, about the offensive linemen moving around in fall camp and them trying to find the best 5 to get on the field. Now, in my mind, the best 5 isn't always the 5 most talented guys. It's the 5 guys that work the best together. So the question is, how do you get those 5 all out on the field? And, you obviously with a young quarterback, and none of these quarterbacks are, the mobile Braxton Miller type. They can all move, but you want to protect them for sure. So the thought was, Thayer Munford, left tackle, put him in an ink. Nicholas Petit-Frere on the other side at right tackle, put him in. And then it's figuring out the interior guys in kind of a conversation between Trey Miller, Johnson, who's everyone believes is going to be the right guard, Matthew Jones, and Josh Fryer for the left guard and the center positions. Now, we've heard a little bit about the fact that they're moving these guys around early on in fall camp, and I think that's the key there. The offensive line in all positions, frankly, you can kind of experiment now. You still got plenty of time to get things solidified, figure out who your best guys are before the season starts. So right now is a good time to do that. Moving guys, the tackles specifically inside, switching the tackles, Nicholas Petit-Frere playing left tackle, Thayer Munford playing right tackle, just trying out different things. DeJuan Jones is another guy who is going to be in the mix in some way. He's a guy who stuck around here, could play at other schools, talented, big guy. He's a guy who they're going to find a way to work him in at the tackle position. So the question of kind of why they're moving around, I think, is just experimental right now. If we end up seeing guys playing out of position or what we didn't expect come the season, I'll be a little surprised. I think that this is just working on different things, maybe something you can use during the season if you want to have some sort of jumbo package or something. But, I think the offensive line, we probably have a pretty good idea unless something changes, with that group. So I think you'll see the offensive line as expected, and that's going to be a very talented group. I don't think we have any question about that. It's just, kind of how do the pieces fit together, and that's what they're trying to figure out right now. Moving over to the defense, I think the biggest question mark for them and maybe for the whole team is how the secondary will improve this year. Ohio State made it to the national championship game last year, granted in a very strange year, by playing some very suspect pass defense, no doubt about it. They were sixth worst in the country in pass defense against the top teams they faced in terms of passing offenses: Indiana, Clemson, and then Alabama in the national title game. They gave up over 400 yards per game, and that's just not how the Buckeyes should play in anyone's mind, especially their own. So that's been talked about a lot, no doubt about that. Ryan Day said today that cornerback Seven Banks has been a little banged up, missed a few practices. So that is unfortunate news because he missed a lot of spring practice too. A guy who got a lot of reps last year, but is still relatively inexperienced. He's a senior, but 1 year as a starter, and it was a very short year. So you want to get him out there and make sure he's improving, but all signs are that he's done everything right this offseason. It didn't sound like it was too serious. And then behind him, in some of the other positions, Marcus Williamson still in that slot corner position. We'll see how that plays out. We saw Lathan Ransom step in there to some degree at the end of last season. Obviously, the linebackers will they play more of a bullet spot? That's something to keep in mind. And then the second corner spot, the second outside corner spot, Cam Brown, I would say, is probably penciled in as the starter. He was kind of a co-starter with Sevyn Banks last year to start the season before he suffered an Achilles injury. There's questions there because you're coming back from an Achilles injury. He said last week he's 100%, but we've seen other guys have issues coming back. You think about even Master Teague last year after he hurt his Achilles in the spring. Tough Borland, who maybe never fully got 100% back in terms of his speed after his Achilles injury. It's a tough injury to come back from, and sometimes even a year later, you're still working to get that back. Cam Brown was asked about his speed, and he said he'll be fine when it comes to that. He's always been a fast guy, was a receiver when he came to Ohio State. But, it's tough to come back from those injuries. And then you got some young guys behind them. Ryan Watts, Legend Cavazos, two redshirt freshmen who didn't play much last year. I don't believe Legend Cavazos played much at all, if at all, on defense. These guys, though, are highly recruited kids who they want to be a part of this rotation and should be a part of this rotation. Legend Cavazos was an IMG guy. He's kind of been through that development at that program, an elite developmental program. So he obviously is a guy who's expected to have an impact. Ryan Watts, a bigger corner, the biggest corner on the team, 6'3". I wrote a story just this past week about the fact that he was a quarterback in high school. He thought he was going to be shorter than he actually ended up. Moved to cornerback, thought he was going to be about 5'10", ended up at 6'3", but has stayed at that cornerback position. He doesn't think it's an issue. It's never been an issue. His speed is still good. So that's another guy that they think can be a part of that rotation. And then you've got the freshmen coming in, J.K. Johnson, just for off the top of my head there, Jordan Hancock, those guys. I do believe that one of these guys will probably work his way into some role, whether that's on the defense, whether they're playing special teams. I think if you can get that four-man rotation with Banks, Brown, assuming he's healthy, then Cavazos and Watts, that's a pretty good group. And then obviously you've got Josh Proctor at safety coming back from last year, and Lathan Ransom we know is going to fit in somehow, and maybe you have a bullet position with one of those guys. So that on paper is a pretty good group, and it's should be much improved given the fact that they had an off season to work on things. Kerry Combs came in last year and really did to work with these guys a lot because spring practice got canceled after 3 practices, and then you didn't have a real normal fall camp. So now you've had a chance to work with all of these guys that coming into last year were relatively inexperienced. Some of them didn't have any experience playing the position at the college level. And, so just another year of development, I think, will really help this group. Now, does that jump them back to the number 1 defense in the country where they were 2 years ago? I don't know. I think that's something you see on the field, but I don't think you need to be that. I mean, obviously Ohio State would love to be, the top pass defense in the country once again. That should always be the goal when you're Ohio State. But, like I mentioned, they made it to a national championship game last year. If that pass defense is, maybe middle of the road in the country, you're talking at least probably a much closer game against Alabama, if not maybe the Buckeyes winning that game. So, that's where they need to improve is they can get through the Big Ten most likely. There are some challenges. Indiana, obviously, a team that burned them last year, throwing the ball. Penn State will be improved and move the ball on Ohio State a decent amount through the air early on. But you can get through most of the Big Ten with the ho-hum pass defense. When that's really going to be challenged is when you get to, assuming they win the Big Ten, the college football playoff. And you saw that last year. Unfortunately, Ohio State was able to beat Clemson with the pass offense and Justin Fields and Trey Sermon coming alive. But you need that pass defense to improve so you don't have to rely on one side of the ball so heavily as the Buckeyes did last year. It's going to be interesting going into the rest of fall camp, I should say, to kind of see how things play out. I mentioned the linebackers, and we can touch on that a little bit, but it's you're replacing 3 starters, and they're still trying to figure out exactly what they want to do with these linebackers. We've seen more of the traditional 3 linebacker set previously. Now, Pete Warner and Baron Browning played sort of that bullet position that's been talked about for the last couple of years. They were just versatile enough guys that they were true linebackers but could cover. I think this year you're going to see more of the actual bullet position. Maybe that's not an every down type of thing. You saw it a lot in the spring game, just given the linebackers that were out. But I think that's something that they want to use, and they've recruited that way. So, that'll be interesting. And then who are the starters at linebacker, the middle linebacker, and the outside linebacker position? I think that the veterans, the Dallas Gants, the Kayvon Popes, Taraja Mitchells, have somewhat of an inside track just because they've been around. But when we were out at fall camp, you saw some of those other guys getting, first team reps. And again, Ryan Day said not to read too much into who's going first drills right now, but it's another interesting position battle. This is what fall camp's all about is like I said earlier, figuring out who fits where, what you can do where, and then kind of perfecting that as you move through camp and you get your starters set. And at linebacker, when you're replacing guys, especially experienced guys like the Buckeyes are, it's going to take some time. And I do think they have the talent to go deeper than maybe they have in other years. The guys like Dallas Gant, Taraja Mitchell, can they step in and be those starters? But maybe you have some of the younger guys that deserve playing time and rotate in for certain situations and things like that. You've seen other teams do similar things. So, that's kind of a wrap up of what we've gotten through the first week, I should say, of fall camp. The Buckeyes are going to continue rolling here until the start of the season on September 2nd at Minnesota. The biggest thing I know is the quarterbacks. We'll obviously have plenty on that, but a lot of discussion on what's going to happen going forward. We'll make sure to keep you covered at Bucknuts. We've got plenty of stuff this week. Throughout the week, we'll try and do these more often. Hopefully, we can get Dave on here too to get his perspective on things. We'll have Steve Hellwagon in as well. Do these videos. We'll have some out at camp as well. So stay tuned on whatever platform you guys are watching on. I really do appreciate you joining us. I apologize again. Dave couldn't get on here. Again, technical difficulties on our end trying to get him in. Still kind of a new thing for us. So we appreciate it. Again, I'm Patrick Murphy with Bucknuts and 247. We'll have all the coverage for you here as we carry through fall camp and into the season for Ohio State. Thanks again, guys. I appreciate you tuning in.